So this is the introduction of the brain parts and its function. So we have four major parts of the brain, starting with cerebrum. As you can see it in here, this is the cerebrum, which occupies majorly about 99% of the brain structure. Then comes the diencephalon. The diencephalon consists of three parts, of which one is not shown in here. One is the epithalamus, which is mainly responsible for production of a hormone called melatonin. And then there is thalamus, there is hypothalamus. So three parts in diencephalon, epithalamus, thalamus, and hypothalamus. And then comes the brainstem, which is around here. So as you can see, the entire middle portion has been brought out. And this part in here is the brainstem, which consists of midbrain. We call it midbrain. Here it is written as mesencephalon, which was an older nomenclature. Then we have a pons, and then medulla oblongata, which continues into the spinal cord. The fourth region in here is cerebellum. So four major parts. Number one is cerebrum. Number two is diencephalon. Number three is brainstem. And number four is cerebellum. So within diencephalon, there are three parts. Number one is epithalamus, thalamus, and hypothalamus. Within brainstem, there are three major parts. One is midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. So let's understand a little bit an introduction of the functions of these brain parts. We'll learn in details as we go along, but the main functions of the cerebrum is it is for conscious thought processing. It is an intellectual function. This is where the command or all decisions are made of the brain for the different parts of the body. Okay, all skeletal motor movements, skeletal muscle movements are all orchestrated or directed from this region, which is called the cerebrum. Diencephalon. First part is epithalamus. As I said, we'll learn about that as we go along. Here is listed a thalamus. It is a relay and processing center for sensory information. So we have done this before, right? Sensory information are those that pass from the different muscle, from its receptors, or maybe the visceral organs through the receptors to the central nervous system. These take in the information to the central nervous system, which in here we are talking about brain. So those are sensory information, and this is where the sensory information is processed. Okay. Third is the one that is shown in here is hypothalamus. The word itself, hypo, means lower. So it's just below thalamus, and that's the reason it's known as hypothalamus. It is a center controlling emotions. Okay, it is a center where several hormone production takes place. So this gland is, or this part of the brain is also called a neuroendocrine part, because it is part of the nervous system, it's part of the endocrine system. So it's called a neuroendocrine gland because it controls the production and function of several hormones. It is also, as it's written here, is a center of many emotions like aggressive behavior or your loving someone. All those emotional factors are governed through this region. Then comes the brainstem, which consists of three major parts. As I said, is midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. Midbrain, it is a center of two major processing center. One is the visual data is processed there, and number two is the auditory. So what you see and you can interpret that object is processed in this region, and what you hear and you can process it is also mainly controlled in this region. Then comes pons. The word pons means bridge. It is actually a relay center between the thalamus and the cerebrum. So it helps to move information to the cerebellum, which is around here, and to the thalamus, which is above it. Okay, it also will learn subsequently. It is also center where it helps a lot for medulla oblongata to do its function. Okay, so next comes the medulla oblongata. It is a relay center for sensory information, as we just learned what is sensory information. It takes up the sensory information and then transmits it, basically gives it to the cerebrum, this part in here where mainly all the control is going on. The other one of the major functions of medulla oblongata, it is a center of many activities, which means that it is a regulatory system where it regulates the cardiovascular, respiratory, and digestive system activities. What it means is it keeps the rhythmicity, it causes the heart pumping with a rhythm, and that rhythmicity is controlled by the medulla oblongata. We'll learn this more in details when we learn the autonomic nervous system, or ANS, and see the role of medulla oblongata in there. But right now, just remember, it is a center for the regulation of visceral function, for example, cardiovascular, respiratory, and digestive system activities. Cerebellum, which is on the posterior end of the brain, is mainly for balance. Okay, it coordinates complex motor pattern. It adjusts the balancing. You can walk in a straight line because of cerebellum. In addition to that, it is also responsible for fine motor function, and we learn all of it as we go along. Okay. So we are going to start majorly with cerebrum, which covers a major part of the brain. And as you can see it in here, there are several ups and downs, which are these elevations and depressions in here, right? These elevations are called gyri, and these depressions are known as sulci. Okay, so very important to remember that these are elevations are gyri or gyrus, depressions are sulci or sulcus. Now, when these depressions or sulcuses becomes little deep, they form what is known as a fissure. Okay, so fissure is a deeper groove, and we know of a very, very large fissure that is present in the brain, which is the largest, which is known as the longitudinal fissure, which actually divides the brain into two equal halves. Okay, so it's called the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, and the longitudinal fissure basically divides it into two halves, and we learn that more as we go along. What you see in here is shown in beautiful colors in blue, green, red, and pink, the different lobes of the cerebrum. So what are these lobes? These are 4 in number. Number 1, there is frontal lobe, there is parietal lobe, there is temporal lobe, and there is occipital lobe. So if you, so basically, if you look in here, the frontal lobe is in the front part of your of the brain. The occipital lobe is behind and the back. The parietal lobe is near the top in the central region, and the temporal lobe is near your ears. So let's learn a little bit of these lobes. The frontal lobe lies deep into the frontal bone. You learned that in skeletal system, and basically forms the anterior part of the cerebral hemisphere. There are several sulcuses and gyruses within the frontal lobe, and the main function is voluntary motor functions. It is responsible for verbal communication, decision making, planning, and personality. Okay, so it is a very, very important lobe because all your decisions and intellect is centered in here. Next comes the parietal lobe. This parietal lobe lies deep into the parietal bone and forms the superior posterior part of each of the cerebral hemisphere. Its main function is involved with the general sensory function, such as evaluating a shape or texture of an object being touched. So if you touch an object, you find it silky. You touch an object, you can say that it is rough. All of these basically evaluating the shape and texture is determined by the parietal lobe. The temporal lobe is internal to the temporal bone, and it is involved in hearing and smell. Okay. The last, which is behind on the posterior end, is the occipital lobe, lies internal to the occipital bone. And it is mainly responsible for processing incoming visual information and storing visual memories. Very important lobe. It takes in visual information and stores the visual memories in the form of visual memories. So these are the four major lobes of the cerebrum, but deep inside the cerebrum, there is another lobe which is known as insula. Okay, so insula is, the word insula means island. It's a very small lobe and it is really deep into the lateral sulcus. It is not very well studied, but we know that it is involved in memory and interpretation of taste. Okay. So this actually, whatever I've said so far is written in words, so you can read through them. This is the frontal lobe, how it is involved in the motor function, in concentration, verbal communication, decision-making, planning, and personality. Parietal lobe is mainly responsible for evaluating shape and size and texture of the object. Temporal lobe, which is involved in hearing and smell, and occipital lobe is responsible for visual information, processing of the visual information, and also it stores visual memories, okay? And insula, which lies deep inside it, is mainly responsible for memory and interpretation of taste. So basically, just to recap, there are mainly four visible lobes and one inside, which is the fifth lobe, the insula. The four lobes are parietal, frontal, occipital, parietal, and temporal. Okay, so the four of them. So let's now understand some other little bit of the cerebrum in little more details, because it is highly important. And we know that it consists of two major parts. It is divided into two major halves, left and the right cerebral hemispheres, by a fissure. So it's a deep fissure, it's a deep cleft which divides the brain into two halves, which is known as the left hemisphere and is known as the right hemisphere. I want you to understand that these two hemispheres apparently look the same, but their functions are very different. Okay, so you have to understand that. And these hemispheres do talk to each other. They are connected with each other, either by bundles of axon that go across from left and right, or sometimes they can go from top to bottom. Okay, so the largest tract that connects the left and right hemisphere is known as corpus callosum, and it is a method by which these two hemispheres communicate with each other. It has been seen that the width of the corpus callosum is different between males and females, or between gay individuals, lesbians, and straight individuals. Okay. So now we are trying to understand the two hemispheres. Okay, how does the two hemispheres differ from each other?